Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Radio Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk radio. Be advised that the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. Here's your conservative, but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Yes, my friends, you've tuned in to hour 2 of today's program. It is my pleasure indeed to be here. Thank you for joining us. If you missed anything in the first hour, you can always go to the website, or if you're watching this on social media, just go look at the other hour, or wherever you've listened to podcasts, my friends. It's my pleasure to be here. There's lots in the stack of stuff. I want to this hour spend a little bit of time. Today is the 100th day of the Trump administration, of term number 2 in the Trump administration. I want to talk about that today because I give it an A++, my friends. So I want to talk about that today. There's a lot of other stuff in the stack, but I want to start there. My friends, and get rocking and rolling. In the meantime, if you are a lover of seafood, listen up. I've got something I think tremendous. The first time I heard about this, I thought this is a great idea. So I live in a landlocked state, Indiana. For those of you who have been educated in the public education world, Indiana is not in the middle of the country, but if you expand the term middle to mean, flyover country, I am in the middle. It's really a third or a quarter of way across the country from east to west. But anyway, we're landlocked is the point, unless you count the Lake Michigan to our north up by the Indiana Dunes. You can't really consider us a place where we can get seafood. Definitely not if you just consider the oceans, right? You got the Pacific Ocean out there on the left coast. You got the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico. Those things are far from us. And so to be able to get fresh seafood here is a challenge, a big challenge. But Kenai Fish has made that possible. In fact, not just any seafood either. They've got seafood coming to you from the pristine waters of Alaska. We're talking the Kenai and Castleoff rivers, where they've got salmon. We're talking the Gulf of Alaska, which again, I don't want you to confuse with the Gulf of America. But they have halibut, they have king crab, they have snow crab, scallops, all sorts of shellfish, tons to offer to you that you can't get fresh in the vast majority of this country. And even if you can, is it as good as fresh, wild-caught seafood from the Alaskan waters? So you can get this delivered to yourself. It's fresh. It comes straight out of those waters. It goes into vacuum-sealed packages. They throw it on a jet. It comes to you next day air, right to where you live, my friends. There's no middleman. There's no grocery store shelves. There's no being transported by semi or rail or any of that stuff. And then sitting in a freezer at a supermarket. None of that stuff is happening. All you have to do is go to KenaiFish.com, and that's spelled like this, Kenai, KenaiFish.com. Use promo code Todd. You're going to save 15% off your purchase as well. Again, check it out, Kenai Fish, Kenai, KenaiFish.com, promo code Todd will save you 15%. All right, so let us, my friends, start by talking about Trump's first 100 days in office. By the way, there is, I believe I have something in the stack of stuff that kind of documents the ways that the media typically covers how they fawn over Democrat presidents, or even presidents a little bit. They fawn over the Democrats. They're at least a little bit friendlier to Republicans like George H.W. Bush than they were to Trump. Of course, times have changed as well. But the first 100 days is a big thing. It was considered the honeymoon period. Now, this is Trump's second term, so it is admittedly a little bit different. But we just went through an intense election cycle. The president is trying to implement his agenda in those first 100 days. Trump, by the way, did not miss a beat. I don't think this administration has wasted a single second this term in office. But the first 100 days is really traditionally supposed to be a get-to-know-you sort of time. This is when, hey, we got to basically allow the people who won the election for democracy to speak, my friends. We got to let our democracy speak so that people, the administration, can implement what they were elected to do. Then you begin to see some opposition. By the way, that's not the case. Trump did not have this in the first term, and he certainly didn't have it in the second term. In fact, the first term's opposition to Trump remarkably resembles the second term of opposition to Trump, or the opposition, I should say, in the second term. In fact, we got someone who's written up articles of impeachment in the House of Representatives. Shocking, I know. This would be the third time Trump would be impeached. That's not going to happen this time, at least with the makeup of the House. But nonetheless, this is what's happening. It was publicly discussed, I believe it was the 11th day of Trump's first term in office. So Trump's never had this 100-day honeymoon. I don't think Trump cares. I think there's a part of him that cares because he's trying to do what he was elected to do, and he's wanting to do that, and he wants some respect, but I think he's largely accepted that, hey, this is just simply not the way it's going to work. These people hate me. They're going to fight me every step of the way. This is what we're going to do. So instead of worrying about that, they've got to work. They've rolled up their sleeves, and they've got down to business. And what has transpired is nothing, in my mind, nothing short of remarkable. To me, the first and foremost, the most obvious victory, if you will, accomplishment of this administration is what they've done along the southern border. This, my friends, is absolutely remarkable. I don't care I do care, but whether you are for or against the open borders we had under the previous administration, if you're for that nonsense and the shenanigans there, whatever your opinion of that, just table that for a moment. To secure our border to where we're well over 90% fewer people crossing that border is remarkable. In fact, yesterday Trump said 99.9% fewer people. It's basically stopped. I read a piece, it was either in the Epoch Times or, and I don't remember, I don't know if I've got it somewhere in the stack here, but I just don't have it handy. But in the article, it basically, they talked with people who were along the southern border, and they said it's night and day difference. And I point this out. You know this. I know this. But I point this out because I run into people on social media who sometimes say, well, that's not what's happening. That's not what's going on. Trump's just out there spouting lies, and he's saying that this is more secure than ever before, but it's the same as it was, Todd. But it's not. It's not, my friends. It's night and day difference. It's absolutely night and day difference. And so that's an incredible accomplishment. Absolutely, positively, one of the biggest accomplishments that has happened, just even historically throughout time. The amount of success, how this issue went from effectively wide open borders 100 days ago to what we have today is nothing short of remarkable. And I've said this before, and I do want to repeat myself. That's part of what I have to do on here sometimes, is repeat the things that are important without repeating them too much, which sometimes I maybe do that. But the point here is that the previous administration could have done something about it. There's been no action taken by Congress. There's been no comprehensive immigration bill that's passed and that's been signed into law by Trump. What happened was that the commander-in-chief, we changed. As Trump said in his joint session speech to a joint session of Congress, it turns out we didn't need a new piece of legislation. We just needed a new president. That's exactly what we needed. And, this isn't just, the left tries to portray this as people who are trying to keep people from, being welcomed into America as immigrants. No, we have a legal immigration system. No one's clamoring. There might be disagreements on how many people should be let in to the country legally, what sorts of people we need, what sorts of things should we be looking at, what's the limits, how many people are we trying to let in legally, all that stuff. But no one's trying to stop legal immigration. If they are, they're in such a fringe, tiny portion of the public, it doesn't, it's insignificant. Again, there might be folks that want to change it, address some of the things, but the bottom line here is that this is about people who are coming across our border without our permission. They are crippling our infrastructure. They are causing our cities to not be able to function without dramatic budget readjustments. There's a massive cost to immigration. In fact, I just saw yesterday, it's in the stack of stuff yesterday. I don't have it in my hands here, but research was shown that the annual cost of illegal immigration, I want to say it was like $400 and some billion, $400 to $500 billion. That was an estimate by one of the groups that studied this. This is a real cost. You can't have people coming into this country at unprecedented rates and not have it impact what happens in cities and states. I mean, it's impossible. This is crazy talk to think that you can do this without any sort of financial consequence, any burden to the people. And I've talked about how this has burdened the American taxpayer far too much. It has been crushing, especially when you factor that in with Biden's economy, Bidenomics, high inflation. People who are scared because the people who are running the economy didn't know what they were doing. So the border is secure. Not only does that help fiscally, which is a portion of this, but it also helps prevent people from being the victims of crimes committed by people who shouldn't even be here. How this doesn't upset more people is beyond my wildest imaginations. If you allow someone into your house that hurts a family member, look, I understand that you can't make decisions for people, but I'm not getting into that, but if that happens, you're going to feel guilty. Especially, you're going to feel guilty if you didn't even take any time whatsoever to look into who the person was that's coming into your house. Or better yet, you didn't even know they were in your house. You just left the front door wide open. You left all the doors open. You took the doors off the hinges, got rid of all the locks, all the security cameras, and just said, hey, mi casa, su casa. Just come on in, have at it, right? And that's risky and dangerous. And there have been people that have been harmed, who have been harmed in ways that will change their lives. There have been people who have been harmed in ways that ended their lives. This is incomprehensible to me that more people aren't bothered by this. It's like we become desensitized. I know you have it, but this country as a whole, this culture as a whole, they're so fixated on, well, what's the race of the people coming in? I couldn't care less about that. They're not supposed to be here, and a certain percentage of them are harming Americans. Some of them, there's a larger percentage that are committing crimes that aren't considered violent, that puts a cost and a strain on society. But then there's a subset of that. They're committing violent crimes, that are members of gangs that are taking over apartment complexes, that have taken over city blocks in Los Angeles. These things are problems, my friends. These things are dangerous. They've hurt people. They've killed people. They've maimed people. And the left seems just to fixate on the identity, the racial and ethnic identity of these people. I couldn't care less about that. What I care about is the safety of American citizens. What I care about is making sure that this government, this country, can operate without an unnecessary burden placed upon it by people who have overwhelmed our system. That is what happened in the previous administration, and now it's been stopped. It's been stopped to the point to where people are looking to self-deport, where they've hired even coyotes in some instances to take them back across the border the other direction, according to reports, according to some things that are being reported out there in the media for, again, whatever that's worth, since they are professional deceivers. But typically the people that report these sorts of things aren't carrying the water for the left, so I'm more inclined to believe these sorts of reports. This is my friends, a monumental thing that's been done here in this country. More to say about this, talking about Trump's first 100 days. Before I get further into this, my friends, you know that every dollar that you spend is a vote for the kind of America that we want to live in. Unfortunately, that's what it's become. Too many companies have taken your hard-earned dollars when you buy products and services from them. They've taken those dollars and they've given them to liberal and leftist causes that you fight against vehemently each and every day in your life. And it can be disheartening. And now we know. We've been awakened to this over the past X number of years, and now we know what the game is. And so we now know that there are things that we can do about it. That's why we started Freedom Marketplace. Freedom Marketplace is a directory of conservative businesses that share your values. They have vowed to not support leftist candidates or leftist causes. And you can go to the website for free, and you can find these companies and do business with them, do business with folks who are pushing in the same direction that you are. freedommarketplace.net, that's the website. Liberty and business for all, my friends. Do business with companies that are pushing in the same direction that you are. Okay, now I want to continue talking about the first 100 days of Trump, but what I want to do here is move on past the border, which is a huge deal. This is, to me, the pinnacle issue. This should be celebrated. And the White House is celebrating this. They're engaging in some political theater, some good political theater, which I talked about in the first hour with some of these coroplast signs with pictures of illegal aliens arrested for crimes that are behind journalists as they report from the White House. I think this is fantastic. So we've got that. There's plenty more I could say about it, but that's all I want to say about it right now, just for the sake of time. I also want to talk about what Trump is doing, what I think is the second most important thing in his term in office, second term here, which is reducing the size and scope of government. Now, this is being done a couple of ways. They're reducing department sizes. They're cutting them down to size. They're reducing staff. They're giving people the opportunity to do these buyouts and early retirements. And they're also having DOGE go in. DOGE is coming in, and they're looking at how money is being spent in our federal government. DOGE is canceling some bad contracts. They're looking for waste, fraud, and abuse. They've uncovered some troubling things pertaining to Social Security and Medicare, or Medicaid, I should say. Some claims of the number of people who are here illegally that are getting access to those. We have children that have gotten grants and so forth. At 11 years old, for example, business grants. We've got all sorts of shenanigans that they've identified. You've got people, Elon Musk says, who are 120 plus years old that are still marked as living in the Social Security database. They're cleaning all this stuff up. They found tons of credit cards that are open, credit cards that could be used to purchase things that slip under the radar. They're just tightening the reins here. They're dialing things in. They're cutting the size and scope of government. They're getting rid of this waste or inefficiency or things that are not being managed properly. And this is good for the American people. Smaller government means more liberty. The bigger your government is, the less your freedom is. This is 100% true. Government is force, as John Stossel used to say on his program. Government is force. And so the more government there is, the more force there is. Force is the opposite of liberty. Force is where the government says you're going to do it our way regardless of what you would choose freely. We're telling you it's going to be done this way. The least amount of that possible is what we want in our society. That's why we don't want a totalitarian government that the left seems to dream of, a government that mandates all sorts of things so that everything is fair and outcomes are just as the people in government think that they should be. We don't seek a government like that. We seek a government that maximizes liberty, that allows you to live your life as you see fit, that gives you as many opportunities as possible to be prosperous and to pursue your dreams and to live again as you want to live. And we want a government that's as small as possible to make sure that we have law and order and safety in this country. That's what we want. That's what we aspire to. That's the best place to be. We've deviated from that, but now Trump is helping us move back in the correct direction. We are shrinking the overall size of government by several ways. Again, reducing the workforce, getting rid of, in some cases, as best as we can, and we'll see how this all ends up, but getting rid of departments, putting things back, taking it away from the federal government, returning it back to the states, which is a conservative concept as well. And of course, these early retirements, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, just tightening the oversight on how money is spent, getting rid of the waste, getting rid of the stupid. That's what we're doing. So that's a good thing. I think that's the second most important thing out there. Now, what's next on the radar? Well, first of all, I would say the third thing that Trump is focused on, and I don't have a lot of time this segment. The third thing that Trump is focused on is what I'm going to say is a longer term view of the economy. So a lot of times, and I've shared this on here before, one of the problems I have with the way that we've been legislating and governing in this great nation for a long time, nobody wants to be blamed for any financial difficulties at the moment. And so the problem has become over time, we have allowed so many bad things to happen in our economy, from the debt, the deficit and the debt, to gross negligence with our spending, to just doing stupid things, right? Taking too much money from people. It's created havoc. It's created long-term problems. And so the quickest and easiest way to fix this is to like rip off the Band-Aid. And so you're not going to have long-term positive change in the economy if you just tinker around the periphery. That might make people feel good. That might show us a moment of a reprieve, of an improvement in the economy, but it's not going to be long-term. Trump says for this to be addressed, we have to deal with some things on a fundamental level. That's where these tariffs come in. It's a negotiating tool. He's trying to get the United States to be treated fairer on the world stage. This then goes out into other areas, which include how the United States is basically carrying more than its fair share of all sorts of things, including the protection of the free world. Trump says this is enough of this. We're not going to put our people at great risk, put more burdens upon them to do all these things for the world. The days of the United States being treated as this giant slot machine or piggy bank are over. So I've got more to say, but I've got to take a break, my friends. Sit tight. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. So, I'm going to continue talking about where we left off last segment, talking about the economy, talking about the next thing that Trump is trying to do. And I've said on this program for a long time that nobody wants to be blamed. I just said this a little bit last segment. Nobody wants to be blamed. You get elected, you have control over things, you got policies, you got how it can impact people's lives, their freedom, and of course, their economic circumstances. And you look at what's happening in this country. And a lot of politicians look at the reality and they say, look, I've got 4 years and I've got to run for re-election. Or we've got 4 years, I'm going to be out of office, and we're going to lose in a re-election if if the economy has had to go through too much turmoil. And so they refuse to address some of these underlying larger problems, which include things like, these trade deals where the United States is being treated unfairly in a lot of ways, the burden and cost the United States has to protect, say, for example, Europe. The United States military, what is it? The United States has the largest Air Force and the second largest Air Force in the world. The largest Air Force, I believe, is the U.S. Air Force. The second largest Air Force is the United States Navy. So you don't just jets are expensive. Aircraft carriers are expensive. Military is expensive, especially when other people around the world, other countries, don't really have much of a military to speak of. And so the United States, right or wrong, at least understandable, came to the point to where they thought we've got to protect the free world, especially coming out of World War II, getting into the Cold War. We understood that communism expanded by nature because you had to continually grow to take over new territory in order to take from those folks to give to the folks that were already in your system, because no one was productive in communism. And so it had to expand. That was the nature of it. It was a dangerous ideology that ran counter to the American system. And so we said we have to beef up the military, and it makes a lot of sense. But the other thing is that we didn't cut other spending, and now here we are. We're in a financial mess, really. $36 trillion in debt. Massive problems. And nobody wanted to fix them. No one wanted to really take care of it. They would rather, so again, I liken this to being diagnosed with a serious illness. Say cancer, for example. There might be treatments that make you feel better. You might get an energy boost or something. You might feel better for a time. But if it's not actually attacking or killing the cancer cells, you're only masking the real problem. And so that's what our government has chosen to do. Trump has taken a different tact. Trump has said, look, there are fundamental problems here. I'm going to address it. Trump has been bold enough. I remember talking about this long before Trump's doing this, years ago. Not this specifically, but in general about some of the things that needed to be done to this country fundamentally to shift our mindset and to break this pattern we're on. Folks, you can't continue to spend money at deficits eternally. That is going to catch up with you eventually. As Jeremiah Wright would say, America's chickens will come home to roost. And that, my friend, is the path we've been on. That's the trajectory we have been on. You've got to cut the size and scope of government. You have to give your people more of their money back. They've got to be able to breathe. The business community has to be able to engage in fair trade around the world. They have to be able to be competitive. We've been hampered in a lot of ways, and the creativity of people and the work ethic of people, we've simply adjusted. But the problem is we've adjusted ourselves into basically a metaphorical corner here. And there's nowhere else to go unless we address the problem. And so Trump says, let me address the problem, as I bump the microphone here. Trump says, let me address the problem so that we can be prosperous again. That's what Trump says. Want to be prosperous again. So that's what Trump's doing. That's the next most important thing. Now, beyond that, well, let me pause there and let me say this. I'm a fan of The Office, And there was an episode, I'm forgetting which one it was, but Michael Scott, played by Steve Carell, one of the best television characters, maybe the best. I put him and Kramer from Seinfeld up there, but I think Michael Scott's probably the best television character of all time. And he is being asked about how he would grade one of his performances. He said, I was going to give myself an A or an A+, but I forgot all about the A++. And so he gives himself an A++. And that's what I would give. That's what I would give the Trump administration here. I would give them that largely because of what they've done on the border. I would give them that because they are doing what is necessary, the hard work and the uncomfortable work of exposing the charade that's been happening at the expense of the American taxpayer inside our federal government. They are exposing it. They are trying to eradicate it. They are trying to shine lights into the dusty corners. They're trying to clean house. They're trying to bring things into order, get things under control fiscally, reduce the size of government, and then, of course, address some of these fundamental problems we've had in our economy. Trump has been very transparent about this. It's going to cause problems, difficulties in the short term, but we will get through this. We will see this through to the other side. And that, my friends, is where we are headed next. Now, what happens after this? Because those are the things that are currently happening. Those are the priorities. Securing our borders, making Americans safer with deportations, reducing the size and scope of government, fixing the waste, fraud, and abuse, and then, of course, fixing some larger fundamental problems with the economic, not system, not capitalism, socialism, but the way that we've allowed these trade scenarios and some larger foundational problems to take root and create problems for the American worker, the American taxpayer. But what's next? And this is where it gets interesting to me, because these things it's where you need to start. There's a lot of people who are chomping at the bit, and yes, I know some of you will write me and tell me it's champing at the bit. You'll be wrong. It's wrong at how I was raised anyway. It's chomping at the bit. It's a word picture where the horse has the bridle in its mouth. I was a horse farmer as a younger guy for a few years, and so the horse will chomp at the bit, and it's meant to indicate, it's an analogy, I guess, or a metaphor or whatever, that says it's ready to go. It's raring to go. The horse is in the starting blocks. It's chomping at the bit. It's ready to get out and run. I know many of you are chomping at the bit to say, okay, all that stuff is well and good, Todd, but there's more stuff that needs to be done. And you're concerned about even other fundamental problems and other questions, which I would say Trump is addressing some of these. They're not at the top of his list. They're probably at tier 2, but I think they will be at the top of his list. I think that, and I would say we've seen a tiny bit of this with the arrest of the judges who have tried to harbor, the judge who tried to harbor an illegal alien, tried to prevent ICE from doing its job. But the next phase is, what do you do with all these people? With all these people who have been operating in the shadows, that have been doing things allegedly under the cover of darkness that are detrimental to the American taxpayer, that are illegal. What are we going to do about that? When does that happen? When do people who have been doing things like what has been alleged to have happened, just with the lawfare against Trump, when are those folks going to be held accountable? I think that once we get through this, the next phase is going to be a little bit more of that. I don't know what that looks like. And listen, I'm not a guy who's clamoring for retribution and payback. I think that that's a bad thing. I think it has to stop somewhere, because if our side just wants payback, then the pendulum will swing when the other side gets power. They're never going to stop. So they're going to want payback. We want justice. We want justice. And so I think eventually we're 100 days in. We've got a lot further to go, right? We're basically a quarter of the way through the first year. A quarter of the way through the first quarter of Trump's presidency. So we've got a long, long way to go. But that doesn't mean that there's not other important things that are going to come up later down the road. I'm still thinking optimistically that some of this is going to be addressed, because there are people that need to face accountability. We do not need to see retribution, but there are people who have clearly done things that they need to be held accountable for. I'm optimistic that that's coming. We will see with time. So, got to take a time out, my friends. Sit tight. Back here in just 8 minutes. Welcome back, my friends. All that's to say, I give Trump an A++. There's still more work to be done. I don't know what's going to happen specifically next. I do think some of those things I alluded to in the last segment will be coming next. But I don't know. I'm not sure. We got a lot of problems in this country, and we're headed in the right direction on many of those problems. Excuse me. So anyway, I want to get to one other thing this hour that I mentioned off the top. I just want to make sure I get to it. Before I do that, though, let me remind you, if you're interested in becoming a lifetime member of the Inner Circle, as a founding member, You can join for just $99. One-time membership. You're in for life. This opportunity is going to pass us by very soon. We'll have other ways to join the inner circle. We just won't have the lifetime membership. So if you're interested in that, got some bonus content, some things behind the scenes, all of that. If you're interested, visit toddhuffshow.com/join for more information or to sign up and secure your spot today. toddhuffshow.com/join, JOIN, toddhuffshow.com/join is where you can go for that. I told you off the top that I wanted to share, I was going to talk today about this headline. Illinois governor declares Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. This is J.B. Pritzker. Again, given the opportunity to be responsible, given the opportunity to try to address what really is the problem for the Democrats, which is they've gone too far left. They've ignored all that. Instead, they want to double and triple down on the idea that they're being tough guys, that they're going to challenge their base to get out there and to get in their faces. This reminds me, by the way, in fact, I might call Governor Pritzker Governor Maxine Waters, because he's channeling his inner Maxine Waters. If you remember a couple of years ago, back when Trump was president the first time, I think it was 2018. I've got a sound bite here. Now, forgive me, I've looked all over for this. Again, I don't have unlimited time, but I found this, it's from the Washington Post, and they've laid music behind this. This is a clip of Maxine Waters acting like a lunatic. This goes into a larger clip where she's saying some really absurd and ridiculous things. She's trying to rile the base up and all of that. This, I believe, was in 2018. Saying that we can't let the Trump administration have a moment of peace. We got to get up in their faces, I believe, is what she says. So there's background music playing here. Forgive me for this. This is the only one I could find, at least of this short clip. This is about a little shy of a minute. I just want to play this because this is what the Democrats were saying 7 years ago, and it's what they're saying again today from Governor Pritzker. But here's Maxine Waters, what she was saying back in 2018.
If we can't protect the children, we can't protect anybody. If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Create a crowd. Get up in their face. Tell them that they're not welcome. Whether you see them at the department store, you see them at a restaurant, or a gasoline station, as Maxine Waters says. She told people at a rally, this says, to stand up against Trump's administration.
The people are going to turn on them. They're going to protest. They're going to absolutely harass them until they decide that they're going to tell the president, no, I can't hang with you.
That was a clip of her on MSNBC. Now, this is a clip of protesters at the time heckling Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen at a Mexican restaurant. I believe this was in, D.C. You'll hear some chanting and some behavior.
Not in the U.S. Not in D.C. Not in the U.S. Not in D.C.
Whatever. You get the idea. So they've stirred that up for a long time. Now we've got Governor Pritzker at the podium as the governor of Illinois here. Listen to what he said. It's a same sort of thing.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption.
I don't believe that, for starters. He's calling for mass protests, mass disruption, calling for it now. One lady standing up applauding. Listen, they don't want to change their party. They don't want to change what caused them to lose.
These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace.
Did you hear that? These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. He continues.
They have to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box.
If you want to get to rhetoric that sounds a little bit like Hitler, maybe those who are claiming that Trump is trying to undermine our democracy, maybe they would want to take a look at this particular clip. They want to castigate us. What do you say? Castigate us basically in public and then defeat us. I forget the phrase he used, at the ballot box, which is fine. But to say that Republicans shouldn't know a moment of peace? Do they not remember that our president has had 2 attempts on his life? 2 attempts to take his life, one of which killed bystanders, one of which struck the president in the ear. Listen, I'm all for political speech and all that. But to say that Republicans cannot know a moment of peace seems like something outside of that. But I got to go. SDG.